They don't necessarily need to go hire a banker, things
Right.
like that. So it just wasn't what it was meant to be. It wasn't the straight and narrow to this abundant life that I hoped. And at a certain point, I basically had to take a leap of faith and say, I thought this was my safe path to success. I actually think I can do better. I think I can find something that, sets my heart on fire, that gives me more autonomy, that's more of a meritocracy where I can really take off. So you Chicago people are my people, couldn't deny it. So I just love the sense of humor and the quirkiness of U Chicago. They have a really particular culture. They like to think differently, and that really struck me.
Would you be willing to share with us an example of the quirkiness?
Oh my gosh. I think U Chicago runs the largest scavenger hunt in the world. My entrepreneur hat and thinking about what type of brand do I want to be in the world? What are my values? How do I want to relate to my clients? Where should I find these clients? Should I hold events? Should I go on podcasts? What information do my clients need that they aren't getting? What resources aren't there in the market that should be to educate them or give them that confidence? And it's a different hat, which has just been so fun.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Christine Healey, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about sort of the amazing things that you're doing with an extreme amount of passion to help people have opportunity that, let's be honest, they didn't have before. I just think this is one of the coolest stories ever. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me. Very excited. And I really want to encourage listeners to quickly leave a review, a comment, help boost this because of all your efforts, and make sure more people get this content. But super excited to dive into my story and share with your listeners.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And by the way, if you're listening to us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, will you? We're very close to breaking a barrier at YouTube. So we're knocking on the door. So we just surpassed 900,000 views in less than a year on YouTube. It's wild. Absolutely, totally cool. So where were you born?
I was born in the suburb of New York, but actually when I was 1 year old, my family relocated to London. Yeah. So I was raised in London until I was 18 and then went back to university in the US.
Why London?
My dad was a financier. So my parents have been expats themselves. So I'm kind of the kid of expats. My parents have been living in different countries since they were 26. So they'd just been all around Asia and thought they were done traveling, came back to New York, had me, and then the offer came up to get the job in London. So it was supposed to be a quick stint, supposed to be 3 years max, but the family was there for 20 to 25 years roughly. And then Abu Dhabi after that. So I kind of was born into this global expat world and mindset just by being originally American. And it's really, really shaped my worldview, thinking, that's cool. Yeah, it's totally realistic for me to move to Hong Kong tomorrow or, being able to talk to people from all around the world and relate to different cultures.
That's really awesome. So the 3 year stint ended up being, it was the longest 3 years of their life, right? Like 25 years,
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. Long 25 years. We're all dual citizens now, so that's really shaped me. I always think what life would have been like if I was raised in the suburb of New York as intended by a little creek and a good school and just
That's
stayed
so
there,
cool.
but life had other plans.
I love that. So, what was your favorite thing about growing up in London?
Favorite thing, probably getting a lot of independence as a teenager because I could go almost anywhere I wanted just by the underground, the tube.
Right.
So I didn't need to drive. I could meet up with friends. I had a lot of independence, I feel, for being so young, and being able to travel across Europe as well because everything's so close. Paris is close, a lot of other places too. So I was really, really privileged in that and being able to explore and have a lot of things on my doorstep.
So, just for people that don't know, the tube, and you mentioned underground, is basically like a subway.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the tube go to Paris?
Well, there's a Eurostar. There's a train that goes to Paris. Yep.
There you go. There you
The
go.
tube doesn't, unfortunately.
That's cool. They
Yeah,
need to do that. They need to connect it, right?
I
That'd be
know.
cool. So, so growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Ooh, that's a great question. Probably my parents, not to be too cheesy, but um, like I said, they
It's not
they
cheesy.
they pursued their ambitions as well. So when they were 26, they left the US and lived
Mhm.
in Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan. So really taking the path less traveled. And I
Mm.
always found that really cool. So house I grew up in was just all this Asian furniture that my parents had collected over the years, which is a bit bizarre. Like you'd step into this London home and you just, a lot of relics from their time abroad. And that really shaped me. It made me want to kind of get out of there. We lived in a super residential, quiet neighborhood, and I wanted to go see the world. And I wanted to go to the bright lights of Wall Street in New York City, and I wanted to just do everything all at once as soon as possible.
That's cool. So, in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Ooh. I explored a bit of everything. By the time I got more senior, that's when we got exposed to maybe more mature subjects like
Mhm.
economics and philosophy and stuff like that. I actually loved philosophy. We called it theory of knowledge. It was
Mhm.
slightly different than philosophy, but same gist. And I kind of fell in love with that. So I knew I wanted to do something in business, but I also knew I had this side interest in logic, in
Mhm.
logical puzzles, in how we think, what do we actually know, what's the limitation of our knowledge of the human experience. So that was kind of my nerdy juxtaposition to the business and the finance. So by the time university came around, I ended up actually pursuing the philosophy. I got a degree in philosophy, but I supplemented with finance classes at the business school and the accounting and all the stuff I knew I had to do as well to take the vanilla path on the side as well.
Do you have a favorite philosopher?
Ooh, I love probably Descartes. I really love Descartes and Rousseau as well. A lot of interesting stuff there. But I spent way too long taking classes about skepticism because I just really enjoyed it and I kept going. So it's I think therefore I am. But what are the limitations of that? Are there things that we can't know? But in the school context, you had to actually write logical proofs around these topics. It was a bit more technical than just that, but exploring some of those fundamental topics of the human experience.
What was your favorite thing about Descartes?
I think it's just baffling really to think that everything we see, everything we take as true in this world may not be so, may not be what it appears. And when you actually break it down, what can we know for certain?
Mhm.
And what will we never actually know? And so it's really baffling, this idea that everything we see and experience in the world might just be our imagination. It
Mhm.
might be a deception from, some people may believe in God. What if there's a deceptive figure that's actually creating these illusions? It's quite profound and kind of shakes up everything that we sometimes intuitively just accept as fact.
That's cool. I like that. In high school, did you have a favorite teacher?
Oh, yeah. Probably my physics teacher. I struggled with physics, couldn't get it, but then he would stay with me after class for sometimes hours and just go through everything in such detail until it clicked. And then I could, do physics all day long and ace the class. But I was lucky in having quite a small school where the teachers were very invested and attentive. And I've always thought that makes such a difference because people do have different learning styles, or some people may be neurodivergent, or some people may just be more creative or more analytical or more verbal or more auditory. And so I've always appreciated people in school context and also, in the working world that are flexible, respectful, that will break things down and just try and get people to understand whatever way they understand best. I've always appreciated that in people.
It's not just one approach fits all, right?
Absolutely.
And, I've been teaching DISC for 33 years, right? Behavioral assessment. And one of the things that fascinates me is how different behavioral styles learn differently, different behavioral styles act differently, right? And if you're able to sort of identify who you are, but also who they are, right? And tailor things to them, it makes it easier to be able to connect, to be able to get through, to be able to have that sort of aha moment that you had where everything clicked. How did that feel when you reached that moment?
It felt fantastic. It kind of felt limitless in the sense that if you have the right coaching, resources, attitude, you can approach topics like quantum physics, or you can approach finance, or you can approach a foreign language if you just tailor it to your strengths. So I think that high school is probably the first time I developed this idea of a real strengths-based approach, and seeing that sometimes people that don't get it the obvious way, they might need a different avenue to understanding something. The people that think differently, often that's where you find the streaks of genius. And I still find to this day in the working world, you get a lot more out of playing to your strengths, and whatever topics you have an unfair advantage where your brain is just wired in a certain way for a certain topic. That's the joy and the exuberance of life in seeing people's talents and where they excel. So it's worth it to find where it clicks.
It's where you soar.
Absolutely.
Right? Point blank, it's where you soar. It's really cool. Okay, so you graduate from high school and you go to university. Where do you go and why?
I went to the University of Chicago. I went there because it was the best school I got into. So I was determined to go to Harvard. Did not get into Harvard, but second to Harvard, I was determined to go to Cambridge. I got waitlisted at Cambridge, but I applied to just about, I think I applied to 25 different universities. I didn't tour any of them, so I wouldn't get too emotionally invested. I just applied to every single Ivy League, all of these fantastic schools. And I went to Chicago because it was the best one academically, a really, really top tier academic school. And honestly, because they were a bit weird and quirky. So when I was comparing UChicago to like a Northwestern or a Vanderbilt, it was like, gosh, I wish I could be those shiny, happy people at Vanderbilt and Northwestern, but unfortunately a bit kooky. So Chicago people are my people, couldn't deny it. So I just love the sense of humor and the quirkiness of UChicago. They have a really particular culture. They like to think differently, and that really struck me.
Would you be willing to share with us an example of the quirkiness?
Oh my gosh. I think UChicago runs the largest scavenger hunt in the world.
Oh my goodness.
Among other
That
things.
is a little quirky.
We also have a broom ball team, which is kind of like hockey, but where you play in sneakers on an ice rink. So you're just sliding all over the place. And then of course, even how they teach, it's okay to be contrarian, or it's okay to explore different avenues as long as you pursue it rigorously, you back up your opinion. So it's just all about curious inquiry and trying different things. Very, very fun.
That's so cool. So your time at University of Chicago was fulfilling. What was your favorite thing about your time at University of Chicago?
Ooh. Such an interesting question. Probably just the people. all kinds of different people. And, a lot of those top universities are specifically trying to mesh together diverse classes.
Kind of like a melting pot almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And having come from London as well, being just thrown into a school of 5,000, I think it was, undergrad, all different walks of life, all different characters, and all of them really smart and really, really passionate about different areas.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved hanging out with the philosophy nerds. I didn't quite fit in, but I really wanted to, because I just thought they were so cool, so radical. But then, going to poli-sci and seeing people that wanted to, be the next mayor or be the next big leader, and just going class to class and meeting classmates with really, really interesting personalities that were dead set on achieving something in all different fields, from sociology to social work to whatever it was.
So after University of Chicago, where do you go?
I went to Wall Street. So that was my childhood dream, the bright lights of New York and Wall Street. And I did the thing. So I got a job at Credit Suisse as an investment banking analyst. Turns out it sucked. I absolutely hated it. I was like, oh, interesting. I really thought I was going to be an investment banker until I was, make MD at 40 and the whole 9 yards. It was just unnecessary torture and toxicity. 80 page decks on mergers and acquisitions. And I will give it credit for teaching me attention to detail, for teaching me to work under pressure. All of those things that came along with it.
You have to raise your game.
Totally have to raise your game. And I've taken a lot from that experience, but it was wildly unpleasant.
It's so funny. I love how honest you are, like how open. I mean, it's refreshing. So can I ask something?
Yes.
So you had always dreamed of the bright lights, big city, Wall Street, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing. What was confirmed? And what did you find out that other than the job sucked, right? What did you find that completely wasn't what you were expecting?
I saw that I was very self-motivated. I like to network. I like to create opportunities for myself, like go get to know other groups within the bank. See, I went to chat with the LATAM team and, get myself on some of their projects. And I knew I had a lot of drive within me and self-determination.
For people that don't know, what does that team do?
So at the time, it was a team focused on Latin America and focused on energy. So it could be mergers and acquisitions of power plants in Latin America.
Stuff that's happening down there.
Yeah, exactly. Gotcha. So I would just go chat with them, see what was going on. And I realized, of course, I'm very self-motivated, love of learning, love to explore different things, and just have basically that internal motor where I just want to see more, I want to do more. I also saw that, at the junior level as a banker, it's not about how smart you are. It's really not about your opinions. It's just about how fast can you build that model, or how fast can you build that deck. And I kind of hated that, because I felt like I actually had a lot of input on strategy, or, well, this company would be a great acquirer for this target, but they just really don't care necessarily about your independent thought. You're just a hired robot to churn out turn out some numbers in the model.
You're a tool.
Right. So I would have loved to be a senior banker, but unfortunately you have to kind of put in the years to even get the privilege of
the dues.
Of sourcing clients and getting to the more business side of the actual work.
Yeah, it's quite a ladder, right?
Absolutely.
So what was the thing that was the most unconfirmed? Like you had this idea of bright lights, big city, Wall Street, right? What was the one thing that you remember that was like, okay, this was not what I expected. This was not what I was looking forward to?
The biggest takeaway, well, I ended up doing that. And then I actually moved to California, and I did another year of investment banking in San Francisco, focused on technology. So at that point, I'd been to 2 different banks, seen 2 different sides across the country. And the conclusion was the same. I went into banking because I wanted to be on the straight and narrow for financial success. What I found was this super regimented, super toxic culture with actually not that much meritocracy. It's
Mm.
so, it's almost dying out in a way as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's becoming commoditized, or even companies themselves are getting savvier, getting better internal teams. They don't necessarily need to go hire a banker, things like
Right.
that. So it just wasn't what it was meant to be. It wasn't the straight and narrow to this abundant life that I hoped. And at a certain point, I basically had to take a leap of faith and say, I thought this was my safe path to success. I actually think I can do better. I think I can find something that, sets my heart on fire, that gives me more autonomy, that's more of a meritocracy where I can really take off. So it was extremely difficult, but I ended up leaving and going to a small startup where I was employee number 23 and throwing away that old life plan I had and saying, I'm going to try something new.
Yeah.
At best, I've got equity. I'm going to make some money from this. At worst, I know I'm going to learn something and it's going to be a great time. I can't really lose if it's a fantastic job and I'm learning a lot. And then money will just be an upside. So I took that risk. It was definitely a pay cut. It was one of the hardest decisions I had to make because it was so divergent. But that's really when my career took off.
Yeah.
So the takeaway is, I think sometimes people are so afraid of risk that they get stuck in these environments that are really not serving them, really not serving their talents and their potential. And I think sometimes to really get to where you'll excel, to get to the life you want, a little bit of risk is mandatory, calculated risk. And you just have to work with yourself. Everyone's afraid of risk to some extent, but that fear shouldn't stop you from doing what is actually in your best interest.
You should just take a chance, right? Because you're either going to win or you're going to learn. And yes, calculated risk, I agree with that. But you're literally going to take off, find where you need to be, right? Or you're going to learn, hey, this isn't for me. This is not the path for me. Just like you found out in Wall Street, right? In San Francisco, just, the Bay Area, right? You sort of figured that out, kind of almost banging your head up against a wall. To your credit, you recognized it, didn't end up with brain damage from it, right? And you pivoted. So when you went to work for the startup, where did you go and why?
So I was browsing all these different startups I could join. I was living in San Francisco at the time, so there were plenty around. And I just wanted to make sure I went to a startup that had a good business, that wasn't just a fad, that wasn't going to go under next year.
Right.
And that's what I had an eye out for. And I came across a company that was called Equidate. And they said, we're creating a stock market for private companies like Airbnb. Immediately favorited, saved, bookmarked. I was super, super interested. So I reached out to them. Coincidentally, they reached out to me the same time through a headhunter. And it was just a great fit. So I came in half operations, half sales. And I'd never done sales and I'd never done operations. So both felt very risky to me. Turns out I actually loved both, but I got this kind of natural high from doing sales. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Like, I loved it. I lived for it. I lived to talk to clients and to ultimately to close the deal, to figure out the puzzle and get them what they wanted and close that deal. And it was so exhilarating, especially compared to banking. Sometimes banking deals could be 6 months, year long, just super long projects. But in the world of brokering private stock transactions, sometimes it's closer to weeks, sometimes days if everything lines up perfectly, but a much faster deal cycle. And so you get that reward of, yes, I did it, I solved it, my client's happy, and then you get to go do the next one. So it becomes this huge rush. And once I experienced that, I knew I was going to basically go full time on the sales side and business development and strategy and deal related work.
You mind if we take it a step further?
Mm-hmm.
So you had this image, this idea of Wall Street, this image of working in investment banking, this image of what it was going to be. And it turned out to be sort of what you expected, but sort of not what you expected, right? And you at some point decided that you were going to allow or work to allow people to access something that isn't currently built. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
I see a running theme here in your entire life story, right?
Ooh.
And I think it goes back to your philosophy, to your love of philosophy, because you start thinking about things in a different realm, right?
Mm.
You're at a college, a university that is known for economics. They turn out economists, like that's what they do, right? And you pursue a philosophy degree at an economic powerhouse. Just follow along with me for a second, right? But this all starts to play out because you're interested in philosophy, which, for lack of a better term, is kind of pushing the limits, right? You're does that make sense? Like
Absolutely.
you're taking this economic powerhouse education that you received, or you received at this economic powerhouse, and you're going out and going, okay, this system doesn't work for me. This system I know has been built over 200 years or whatever, but it just doesn't work for me. Then you turn it into, how can I make it work for somebody else? You find Equidate. Tell me if I'm wrong. You find Equidate, right? And Equidate gives you an opportunity to break down barriers. Does that make sense?
100%.
It's like
You're
the
spot on.
story of your life. Your entire life has been about helping people. It's where we're headed. The whole story of your life is about how can I help people get to where they want to be. And I would assert here that part of the reason you loved sales was sales turned out to be something you were not expecting it to be. And then you found out that sales is all about taking somebody's current situation and helping them through your product, helping them to get to where they ultimately want to be.
That's
the story of your career and your life, if you think
It's
about
true.
it.
I've never thought about it this way, but because you bring it up,
I think about everything differently than everybody else.
well, I love that. But you are spot on, because when I think about who I am as a person, they were my love language. My love language, one of them is acts of service.
Yeah.
And I'm also very intellectually driven on my own goals, my own ambitions, learning more for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the type of person, when I uncover something amazing or I figure out how to do something really difficult, I want to then go show my family members, show my friends, show other people, and share that through. So it's that acts of service type of thing. So I'm simultaneously, really, really trying to hone my talents and build something for myself, but also to share those talents with other people. And that's probably what I get out of it. I get to go have this incredibly mentally stimulating job of brokering deals, sourcing transactions, that whole world, which really makes me, mentally happy, gets my endorphins and my dopamine going. But I get to share what I've learned with other people in a way that really practically helps them, whether it's building a portfolio, whether it's selling a stock, which gets them into a house for their family, whatever it is. There's a really practical impact of the work. And so I get to spend all day solving puzzles, which maybe is that philosophy student. I love the puzzle, but it's a puzzle that actually people find a lot of value in. And I love that act of service.
You're like pioneering. You're breaking down barriers, right? And then sharing that success with people and helping to empower them. Like that's your entire thing. Anyway, I just think it's really cool, right? Like really cool. And I love the fact that, so how long were you with Equidate?
I was with Equidate roughly 4 years. So at a certain point, they rebranded to Forge. Again, I was employee number 23. I was with them until they were 350 employees or something like that, and eventually went public. I also spent 2 years when I was working for them in Hong Kong. So at a certain point, they sent me to Asia to do the same kind of work, pre-IPO stock transactions, for the Asian market and for cross-border. So that was a whole new thing. And that was probably the first time I felt like an entrepreneur, because even within this 350 person company, it was myself and another guy building on the ground. So it was like a startup within this huge company. And so that's the first time you're thinking about go to market. You're thinking about foundational partnerships. You're thinking about who are my starting clients going to be. You're thinking about what's the right revenue mix for this new business to keep us alive and sustainable. All those questions that a founder kind of thinks about. So that was really my first taste of that. It was incredibly challenging, but very, very fun. So roughly 4 years total with Equidate, which became Forge. But I think a year in startup land sometimes feels like 5 years of regular work life.
It does, but it gives you an opportunity to do the acts of service thing, right? So what was the conversation like with your parents when you let them know that you were heading to Hong Kong?
Not surprised. I think they were surprised, and I was surprised too that was on the table in the context of working for a startup. Yeah. So I always had in the back of my head, maybe I'd live in Asia, maybe I'd live somewhere abroad. But when I left the investment banks, I kind of thought that was over. Yeah. Because, with Credit Suisse or with JP Morgan, you can maybe go to Asia on a transfer, but I never thought a little startup in San Francisco would be the company that would send me to Hong Kong. Yeah. So it was kind of like a meant to be moment where I cannot believe that happened. And I was the one person that got selected for that foreign assignment, and it came out of a startup in San Francisco. So I was just like, oh, I guess this is fate.
I'll bet that was a fascinating phone call with your parents.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about pre-IPO. We're going to talk about how you're helping people that didn't have access to this, have access to something that was only reserved for a very privileged few. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com. And it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Christine Healey from Pre-IPO, and we're talking about, before the break, we were talking about how your parents had been working in Asia. You end up working in Asia. World comes full circle, right? And you end up you're with Equidate for like 4 years. After Equidate, where did you go?
So at that point, I was considering starting my own business because I was brokering, I was working on the ground in Hong Kong, essentially building a startup, just myself and another person, eventually another person too, tiny little team within a giant company where everyone else was in the headquarters in San Francisco. So I got my taste of being an entrepreneur, but I found building that new business within a large, mature company was next to impossible. Just the needs, the direction, the speed that you need to develop in a new market was not really compatible with the risk appetite, the speed, the conservatism of a giant organization. So I thought, if there's going to be too much friction doing this within the big business, I'm just going to go build my own and do the same work, but with a bit more independence and speed, and serve my clients in a better way. However, I was basically intercepted by the original founder of that startup, who wanted me to come work for him on his new project. And so last minute, I kind of decided to pivot, table starting my own company, and go work for that new company, Destiny. So Destiny's mission, super fascinating, is basically to have a publicly listed fund where anyone can invest in all these different high-tech private companies that you can't access easily otherwise, SpaceX, OpenAI, etc., and to make that a public fund. No minimum investment size, no accreditation needed, just buy it right there on your brokerage app. So a huge idea. It was a big enough idea that I thought, all right, we're going to table my own company for the time being. And I went there. I was the head of private markets and the portfolio manager of that fund for 3 years, until just around a year ago, where that entrepreneurial itch would not let go of me. And I finally did the thing that I'd been dreaming of then had tabled for the time being. And I finally left to start my own business and to fulfill that vision.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
So when you were heading in the direction of leaving Equidate, which then became Forge, right? And you were heading towards starting your own company, and the founder comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got this startup that I'm doing and I want you to come with me." What motivated you to put the you're starting your own company, putting that on hold, right? And going and doing this?
It felt like, because it was the founder of the previous company as well, and this is his new project, it felt like we could cumulatively take everything that was so exciting about the first company and build on it in a new way. It was almost like the V2. So, I was told we're going to be 100% remote. You want to go be a digital nomad? You want to work from Buenos Aires? You want to work from Greece? Have at it. We don't care. You're going to be judged by the quality of your work. Great. Meritocracy. Love that.
Yeah.
We're going to stay small. We're going to stay limber and strategic. We're not going to hire 100 people for the sake of it. We're going to stay really disciplined in the size of the team and the culture we create. Fantastic. There's the equity component of working at a startup and thinking, if this goes somewhere, the equity is going to be really the most valuable part of the experience, monetary wise. And then the mission of what they were doing. I believe in access. I believe in not just the rich getting the cool investment opportunities and getting richer, but bringing that to more people. So to have a fund that anyone can access, no minimum net worth required, and to bring that to a stock exchange, anyone can access it from their Fidelity or their Schwab or their Robinhood. That was a revolutionary enough idea that I wanted to see in the world.
I feel like we should start a bulldozing company.
Tell me more.
and do it in your name, because you're constantly knocking down barriers. Sorry, I'm just kidding. I'm getting corny, but I think it's important that people understand that throughout your entire life, that's what you've done. You've been all about breaking down barriers and all about opening up access. And so you go out and you start your own company. Can you talk about because there are people that are listening to this that are thinking about starting their own company, and they might, they're in the, can you talk about the mindset of going out and starting your own deal?
I think it depends what type of business you're going into.
Yeah.
So you have to think rationally about your business model. I'm very lucky in that my business is a services business. I don't have a lot of costs, to be honest, maybe a bit of marketing, a bit of system, stuff like that. But I actually work from home. We're in my home right now. So I don't pay rent on an office. I don't have employees. I have one assistant who works with me on a contractor type basis. So I think if you can have a business model that is very lean and low cost, that's a really great way to reduce that feeling around risk of starting your own company. If you're going to go, make bricks and sell bricks, and you need a warehouse for those bricks, and suddenly that's a business that's going to be very, very cost intensive. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the revenue and the consistency of that and so on. So it's a bit easier to start your own business if what you intend to do is services based, and you can get your costs as low as possible or as close to zero as possible. So it gives you that breathing room to try new things, to innovate, knowing that, if you have one bad quarter, your business isn't dead. Right. You can kind of ride the wave of entrepreneurship, and it's great in terms of a business model from my perspective.
So you've been doing your current company pre-IPO, right? You've been Healy Pre-IPO, right? So you've been in business now for a year?
Yes.
Okay. How's that been? What's that been like?
It has been honestly phenomenal. Firstly, it's been a lot busier. It's been a lot more work, but it's been very financially rewarding. So things are on the up and up. But also it's been so incredibly fun having the creative direction of doing my own thing. So, I want to explore clients in this area of the market. Or why don't I try this type of deal for my client? I think it's going to be something they haven't considered that might serve them best. And removing all those blockers of having a manager and a manager of your manager. And I think as a founder with that independence, if you have a great idea, you can go test it, see it out, see if the client likes it. That's really your main litmus test. And there's less blockers in the way. In a more corporate environment, you have a good idea, you need to go convince someone else that it's a good idea. They might go talk to another committee to see if it's a good idea. Then if you're lucky, maybe you could test the idea and see if the client actually wants it.
Yeah.
So in a way, I've just cut out so many layers where I just need to figure out what's going to serve my client and go test it and do it. And my client's happy, everyone's happy. So there's a lot less fluff around my day-to-day, and I get to spend the vast majority of my time talking to clients, matching clients, serving clients, working on the actual stuff, and less on the, all hands, reporting to my boss what I got done this week, that type of thing, which you always have in any employment interaction. So it's really, really fun to think with a lot more time on my deal making hat, which is more the individual performer, a lot more time to focus on that. But at the same time, my entrepreneur hat, I'm thinking about what type of brand do I want to be in the world? What are my values? How do I want to relate to my clients? Where should I find these clients? Should I hold events? Should I go on podcasts? What information do my clients need that they aren't getting? What resources aren't there in the market that should be to educate them or give them that confidence? And it's a different hat, which has just been so fun. So as a broker, technically speaking, if I have a bad quarter, I bring in nothing. There's no salary. I make zero. There's nothing fixed whatsoever. So that's not for everybody. Nothing's recurring.
Yeah.
So I have to go out there and hunt and find the deals and get the stuff done. And with that, you're going to have some quarters that are better than others. And you just have to live with that risk, because I think we're all afraid of risk to some extent, but I would rather live with a bit of risk and bet on myself than to be trapped in an investment bank where you're shoved into this cookie cutter role with very limited upside, or, you have to go ask nicely for a raise at the end of the year. I'm just so over that, gag. I think it's great. If you want to go make more money this year, go out there and find the value, create the value, and do it. And it's completely off your own back, and it requires a lot of self-belief. But I'd rather sit with that risk and rise up to the self-belief rather than feeling stuck or wondering what if.
Exactly. So you mentioned it, you sort of hit on it, but I want to ask you about it. So in the last year, what has the feedback been from your clients?
Once clients find me, they tend to stick to me. They tend to do that first deal and then say, all right, what are the 3 next deals we're going to do?
Yeah.
A lot of people that are newer to this type of investing, it's really about getting that first deal done, going through the motions so they can actually see and feel what the deal process looks like. And then after that, they're really, really comfortable. So I'm really, really committed to my clients. What I want to be is the small business version, the small business type thing where you're working with me one-on-one. Every single client works with me. You're not working with my assistant on the deal. It's me every time. And you're getting that human, almost old school approach, even though the type of stuff we're doing, the type of investments are very new school, but you're doing it in a human way where I can help walk you through everything. Like we were saying, I'll take the time to make sure you understand it on your level or in your way. We can talk for hours if we need to, just to make sure you're comfortable and we're covering our bases. And I'll take that time with you to reach you in whatever way is most useful. So yeah, very fun.
So can you walk us through how this works? So let's say a client calls you today and they're interested in investing in a tech company that's not gone public yet, like SpaceX, whatever, right? You're going to have a conversation with them. It sounds like where you tell me that you schedule a time to talk with them. Is it a free consultation?
I only ever charge basically performance fees, a broker commission once the deal is fully closed.
Okay.
So anytime you're talking to me and we're exploring, it's just a free conversation.
Okay. So, and that's good to know. So they call you, or you set up a call and you're having a conversation with them. What's that like? Like you're asking, what are you asking them and what are they sharing with you?
Well, first I try and assess where are they in relation to this universe of pre-IPO companies. So have they done a pre-IPO deal before? Do they do 10 a year? Are they somewhat in investing, but this type is new to them? Or are they in just such a different field? Are they a real estate investor or a doctor or a lawyer, and they're approaching private stock transactions for the first time? So that will tell me what's basically going to be the most useful way to use the time. If they do a pre-IPO deal every week, that's clearly a very different conversation. We're talking more about, okay, what's the absolute best pricing? Just, it's very matter of fact. If someone's new to the market, then we need to talk more about how things actually work and give that context up front to get them comfortable into a first deal. And then to see if it's even a fit for them. So I need to understand, what is their profile? What are their types of needs? What kind of sizes are we talking? What companies or industries appeal to them? Are they coming in saying, I want SpaceX, Stripe, OpenAI? Are they coming in saying, I really believe in robotics? What do you have within the robotics industry? And so on. So I try and be very attentive in those conversations. So I really, really know my client, because if I really know my client, I'm going to know who the perfect match is. So based on whether they want 50K of Stripe or based on whether they want $1 million of SpaceX, I'll know what types of counterparties are going to be the right fit, whether it's a fund, whether it's an employee that has shares of a certain company. Knowing my client's goals, it becomes obvious very quickly who might be the right match for what they're looking for.
Gotcha. So I think that's imperative, by the way, sitting and figuring out, how do you win with them, right? What is it exactly that they're looking to accomplish, and what has happened, quite honestly, in the past that didn't reach their expectations? Those types of things are incredibly important to talk to an investor about, simply because you need to know this is where they're headed. This is right. This is kind of what their journey has been. This is sort of how they've ended up arriving where they are, and this is where they're headed. This is what tomorrow looks like, right? So if somebody's reaching out to you, well, actually, let me ask you this. So in order to reach out to you, what's the best way for somebody who's listening to this that might be interested in a discovery call, right, to figure out if this is a fit for them? How can they reach you?
So I would say if someone's ready for a discovery call, or it's going to be most useful to just speak with me directly and get out those questions, you can email me at Christine@HealyPre-IPO.com. So H-E-A-L, yep, Healey, Irish name. Doesn't always have the extra E, so watch the extra E. Healey, pre-IPO.com. So that's my email. It goes straight to me, and we can set up a time. If someone's more exploratory, they want to just hear me talk about some more topics, watch some educational content, get their feet wet. Not everyone wants to jump on a call right away. Then you can go to HealyPre-IPO.com, same spelling. And you can see I've actually put an education section there. You can see some videos I've done. So there's one on just navigating private deals, an hour detailed discussion about how these negotiations actually work or how to approach it. There's a session there on investing in Elon Musk's companies, SpaceX, XAI, Neuralink, and how to invest in Stripe, and longer discussions there. So there's some videos there off the bat. There's a mailing list you can sign up for, more educational content. So what I like to think is a treasure trove, because the reality is very few people are making good, candid educational content about this industry. There's very few people doing any education at all. And
about
the ones that
industry.
are, right. And the ones that are often very, very cagey, like just contact us to learn more. And they haven't actually given any value in the posts. You haven't actually learned anything about what investing in Stripe looks like process-wise, or what structure, or what minimums. So I'm just trying to put all that out there, so people can see what it's like, and then come to me with questions or for a call if that's the next step.
I think we skipped over something, and I want to make sure that we don't skip over this. And I feel like here's the thing. I've told you before we hit record how much I admire you. I really do, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge that you're helping people do something that, quite honestly, was reserved for a very privileged few that are worth just a ton of money. Okay. What you're currently offering is breaking down barriers. And I mean major barriers. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's giving people an opportunity that they just didn't have before. Honestly. And it's not, I don't want this to sound, well, it's going to sound corny, but whatever, right? It is what it is. I mean, I feel like it's important that we talk about sort of how the system used to be and then how the system is now with you, because there are a lot of people that are listening to this that don't quite know the historical background. When I saw what you did, I instantly wanted you on the podcast. I instantly wanted to know your story, because I know that there was a time, and there still is in some instances, where IPO was reserved for, pre-IPO was reserved for the very privileged few, right? The very wealthy few. I mean, it was, you had to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. If you didn't have like a major portfolio or major net worth, you just didn't qualify. You just couldn't get into that circle. Can you talk about what that used to be like and still is today in a lot of instances versus what you're currently doing?
Absolutely. So it's a two-parter. Firstly, very briefly, what I do is very simple on the surface. I match buyers and sellers of private high-tech company stock. So very, very late stage, large tech companies, SpaceX, Stripe, OpenAI, Anthropic, huge ones, not so much the startups. And I help people access investments in those names that are private. You can't find them on your public brokerage app. Yeah. And so it's a whole bespoke process. It's very simple. I match buyers and sellers.
Yeah.
The why of what I do is really, really a topic I love to talk about. It gets me very passionate. Here's the why. Years ago, companies would go public very early on in their life cycle relative to today. It wouldn't be unusual to see a 5-year-old company go public. Today, that's completely shifted, and we're in an era where companies could be 10, 15, 20 years old before they actually go public. And a lot of iconic founders, a lot of big companies like Elon Musk are saying, I really don't see the benefit of going public. It would benefit my huge tech company to just stay private as long as humanly possible.
Why?
So why? Because you have less distractions and obligations, less reporting. You basically, it comes down to control.
You have less active
control
investors,
of your company,
right?
Absolutely. You don't have to have quarterly financials, released to the public. If you're like Elon and you're trying to build civilization on Mars, which is one of his stated goals, that's a moonshot goal. It ain't easy. And the last thing you want to deal with is the ups and downs of a daily fluctuating stock price on the public market, or, we need to go deliver a return quarter on quarter, and all of those kind of minutia of being public that just wouldn't apply if you were private and able to stay focused. And, Elon's not the only one. SpaceX isn't the only company. You see this with Stripe. You see this with OpenAI. You see this in really a number of really exciting businesses that are at a size where they could easily be public, but they don't want to. So for a lot of companies, an IPO is no longer this glorious goal, this finish line. There's so many other ways to be successful and continue to grow outside of public scrutiny and public distraction. So the reason this matters is because you have an enormous amount of huge technological transformations, from AI to space travel, all different areas that are essentially kept in the hands of just the venture capital investors and the select few that can access them while they're private. Because while these companies remain private, everyday people can't go buy it on their Robinhood or their Schwab or their Fidelity. So the reason this is important is companies these days are literally getting to hundreds of billions of dollars in valuation. SpaceX hit 400 billion, OpenAI hit 500 billion just recently. So you could be $500 billion in scale as a private tech company and still not be investable by the everyday person. That is in many ways a travesty. That is in many ways, I mean, it gets my blood boiling in a sense because of inequality of access and in blocking people out of financial opportunity, but also beyond that, at a broader level, seeing the spoils of technological innovation, of seeing ownership of the future be kept out of everyday people's hands, having ownership of game-changing technologies that are literally redefining our future, be only in the hands of people that are already rich or billionaires or venture capital funds. And there's a real divide there that people don't always see, obviously from the surface, but it's such a pronounced theme now where companies are simply not going public at the same rates. And so everyday investors sometimes are just left with the scraps. If that company goes public in the last 5%, of its growth cycle, hypothetically, the everyday investors are stuck with that little 5%. They may have missed out on all the value growth from 0 to 500 billion or more. And so when we talk about financial empowerment, financial literacy, I want more and more people to realize that divide and to actually break down those barriers so more people can, if it's a good fit for them, get involved and have an actual ownership stake in technologies that are gonna change everything.
Yeah. What you're doing is major. It really is. And I want people to understand. I want them to understand that, I just read a book the other day that Mark Benioff wrote called Trailblazer. I don't think he's a trailblazer compared to you. I think you are, and I'm not criticizing Mark. I mean, they've done amazing things with Salesforce. And I loved his book, by the way. The fact of the matter is, in his own way, he's a trailblazer. You are just, I mean, it's really, really cool what you're doing and the service that you're providing to people. Let's be honest, you don't have to do this, okay? But the fact that you're doing it and the fact that you're doing it the way you're doing it with the passion that you have behind it, right? For lack of a better term, being a change agent, to use an industry term, right? It's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. And I hope people pay attention to what you're doing. And more specifically, I hope people pay attention to why. And I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm so glad we had a chance to meet and spend this time together. So it's Christine and Christine's the normal spelling, Christine
Absolutely.
at Healy, Healey, pre-IPO.com.
Absolutely. And the last bit, that's my website handle as well, Healy Pre-IPO.com. So it's all there.
Beautiful. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.